Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Top 10 players for this Michigan program heading into 2024. And as you kind of stack these top 10 players, you start to understand that a lot of national media members, a lot of casual college football fans across the country, kind of writing this Michigan team off because on paper, on the surface, this Michigan team obviously loses their head coach, loses a ton of talent to the NFL draft. And I think a lot of Michigan fans, we're sitting here and saying there's still a lot of really good football players returning to this Michigan program heading into 2024. And I think something that I personally thought as a Michigan fan myself was awfully cool. I think Michigan has three players that are the best in the country at their respected positions. And I don't mean to spoil our top three players, but you look at Will Johnson, probably the best cornerback in the country. You look at Mason Graham, probably the best interior defensive lineman in the country. Then you look at Colson Loveland and say that's probably the best tight end in the country. I don't know if there's another program that can say they have three players that are the best in the country at the respected position. This Michigan team still awfully dangerous heading into 2024. Fired up to get into this one. Before we do, and as always, just want to give a massive shout out to the Michigan fans. Y'all know I'm a massive Michigan fan, and it has been just an absolute blast talking this program with you guys over the last couple of months. And the amount of support the Michigan fans continue to show, that stuff, it absolutely means the world. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, I would love to get some feedback from you guys in the comments section, whether you agree with some of my takes, whether you disagree. Drop your top 10 players, drop some players you might think I'm sleeping on heading into 2024. We'll chop it up. I always learn a ton from you guys, but most of all, just love talking Michigan football with you guys in the comments section. And without further ado, I want to get into this one. I want to start with just a few of quote unquote my guys that are not necessarily going to be in my top 10 list, but guys that very well could be top 10 players for this Michigan program. Now, I threw in two true freshmen. I thought Cole Sullivan at the linebacker spot looked phenomenal in the spring game. I thought that was a great evaluation out of the high school ranks. Cole Sullivan has a very bright future, whether that's in 2024 or over the next couple of years. And then the other guy I want to give a quick shout out to, Josiah Edmond. You look at Josiah Edmond, extremely talented kid coming in the summer for Michigan. Although we didn't get him in for spring practice, we're looking for some talent at that cornerback position. I would not be surprised if you start hearing some Josiah Edmond whispers coming out of fall camp. And again, probably not a day one starter, but potentially a guy that can get on the field for this Michigan program. And then my breakout players. Now I'm going to go one Miles Hinton, and I'll preface this with Sherrone Moore is a heck of a lot smarter of a football guy than I am, and I trust Sherrone Moore, but I look at Miles Hinton and look at some of the reps that he had in 2023 and say probably could have been playing a little bit more. And I think you look at how Miles Hinton plays, it matches up exactly with what Michigan wants to do. Road grader in the run game, easily moves guys off the line of scrimmage. I think Miles Hinton has the potential, especially going into year two with this program, under the development of guys like Sherrone Moore. I think you might be looking at one of the better tackles, not only in the Big Ten, but in the country. TJ Guy, from what you're hearing out of spring practice, is going to be a dude coming off the edge. And then let's go to sophomore Jair Hill, a guy that played sparingly as a freshman. DJ Waller transfers out. I think that says a lot about what Jair Hill is doing at that cornerback position. Largely an unknown right now. Couldn't throw him in the top 10, but certainly could be a top 10 player for this Michigan program. And without further ado, let's get into this top 10. And I'm going to go first to the transfer from Maryland, Jayshawn Barham at that linebacker position. And what fires me up the most about Jayshawn Barham is, now I remember this kid playing Michigan against Maryland as a true freshman and saying this kid has such a bright future, and quite frankly, probably played better as a true freshman than he did as a sophomore at Maryland. You take a look at some of the things that really excite you if you're a Michigan fan, is what he can do playing downhill, but more importantly, what he can do as a pass rusher, right? It's no secret that Wink Martindale coming in wants to get aggressive in terms of blitzing guys at the second level, whether it's safeties, corners, linebackers. Jayshawn Barham was one of the best blitzing linebackers that you saw in the country. 15 quarterback hurries, a 22% pass rush win rate. Whether he's coming off the edge, whether he's going between the A and B gaps, I think he, one, is a great linebacker, but more importantly, I think really fits what Wink Martindale wants to do in terms of getting aggressive with that pass rush at that linebacker position. Going to number 9, I'm going to go Donovan Edwards. And this is where I think a lot of Michigan fans might push back a little bit and saying you're too low on Donovan Edwards. And I'll say this is not me being low on Donovan Edwards as much as the next 8 players that we're going to talk about are all extremely good football players. And you look at Donovan Edwards, and I think what excites you the most is just more opportunity. And I think as Michigan fans, we've been banging the table for the last couple of years. How can we manufacture more explosive plays? Getting more touches to Donovan Edwards is certainly a way to do that. I mean, he is lightning in the bottle. And you'd like to see a little bit more consistency that Blake Corum gave you in 2023. And I think that's going to come with the first healthy offseason Donovan Edwards has had with Michigan, but more importantly, just getting more opportunities. It's hard to kind of find yourself in that groove and give that consistency when you're only getting 8 to 10 touches a game. And if you get Donovan Edwards 15 to 20 touches a game, get him more involved in this offense, I think you're going to see Donovan Edwards benefit from that from a down-to-down basis and what he can do as a pass catcher. I mean, whether he's motion out of the slot or whether he's coming out as a pass catcher out of the backfield, and this is an offensive weapon that you can get incorporated in multitude of ways, not just running the football between the tackles. I am fired up to see Donovan Edwards, potentially be the guy in this running back room. And I'll give a quick shout out to my guy, Kalel Mullings, as well. You guys know I'm a massive fan of what Kalel Mullings can do in terms of that physicality he runs with now. Going to number 8. And again, I think this tells you how good this Michigan team is. Makari Page checking in at number 8, and he is going to have a lot of responsibility. Obviously, with Rod Moore going down, I think you look at Makari Page and say, him and Will Johnson are probably the leaders of this Michigan defense in the back end. And you look at Makari Page, one of the things that I really appreciate is what he can do as a box safety. And this is a guy that is 6'4", 210 pounds, has done a massive job kind of transforming his body, putting on some weight, adding to that physicality. And we say this all the time. You got to have that coverage and speed on your defense, but not give up in the run game. And Makari Page is a guy that you can put in the box. He can deal with tight ends and slot wide receivers, but also, kind of be that third linebacker. And that chess piece in a Michigan defense is going to be absolutely massive for this Michigan program. Makari Page checking in at number 8. Now going to number 7, we're going to go to another transfer, and that's Jaden Mangum coming out of Michigan State. This kid was a second-team All-Big Ten guy last year, and I think the attribute that I love the most about Jaden Mangum is, he's a ball-hawking safety, and you talk about where Michigan took their strides in 2023. It was forcing turnovers. It was getting hands-on footballs, creating those, game-changing plays, those plays that win you football games. Jaden Mangum, as a former wide receiver coming out of high school, has such a knack for playing the football in the air. He's got really good instincts, really good length, really good range in the back end. You talk about a true center field safety that can just keep his eyes on the quarterback and go attack the football when it's in the air. I think Jaden Mangum is kind of that guy. And you look at Makari Page, Jaden Mangum, the two safeties that I think start for this Michigan program, they really balance each other out extremely well. Makari Page, probably a guy that plays a little bit more in the box. Jaden Mangum, a guy that probably plays more in that back end. That's where they excel. I think they fit really well together in terms of balancing each other out and how they play. Going to number 6, Josiah Stewart. Now, I went just back and forth with Josiah Stewart and Derek Moore. And as the Michigan fans, I think we kind of agree that they're 5 and 6. Now, what order you want to put them in, I think I can respect either opinion. I went with Josiah Stewart. He might be, from a pure pass rusher standpoint, probably a little bit better than Derek Moore. You look at 17 quarterback hurries, a 17.6% pass rush win rate. I thought he got better as the year went on for Michigan, kind of adjusting to that Power 5, that Big Ten level of line of scrimmage play. I think he's a guy that can go for 10-plus sacks. And when you ask him to just pin his ears back, he's a little bit different. Coming off the line of scrimmage, has a deep toolkit of pass rush moves. I think Josiah Stewart, certainly a 10 sack a season caliber guy for Michigan. And then going to 5, Derek Moore. Two really good edge players. The reason I went with Derek Moore is I think he's a little bit better in the run game. You talk about Derek Moore has been a grown man since he's walked on to Ann Arbor or walked on to this Michigan campus. I remember him playing as a true freshman and saying that kid looks like he's been in a college football program for 5 years. And he's played like that. And now going into year 3, that's kind of where you see defensive linemen, guys on the line of scrimmage, kind of take that step. Derek Moore, big time power in his hands, can collapse pockets just about as good as any edge rusher in the country. But I think most importantly, and something that doesn't get enough talked about, but Michigan fans certainly know the importance of it, is having your edge rushers be able to stop the run and be hammers in the run game. You look at Braden McGregor, Jalen Harrell, Derek Moore, Josiah Stewart, all 4 of those guys can stop the run at an extremely high level. I think Derek Moore might be the best of that group. That's what has him as a top 5 player for this Michigan program. But again, Josiah Stewart, Derek Moore, I wouldn't argue if you wanted to stack those guys in a reverse order. Going to number 4, and that's Kenny Grant. And Kenny Grant is kind of a freak show athlete for that size. And I think what really stands out with Kenneth Grant is he's a guy that can do the dirty work, take on double teams, be strong at the point of attack, but he also can get after the passer. And you look at other interior defensive linemen, you got some that can get behind the line of scrimmage, penetrate, give you some pass rush juice, but probably struggle to hold up against double teams. And then you have interior defensive linemen that can hold up against double teams really well, but can't be difference makers and pass rushers from the inside. Kenneth Grant can do both at an extremely high level. A 10% pass rush win rate from a guy like Kenneth Grant, that size on the inside, that is an extremely impressive number. 14 run stops, 5 pass breakups. That's something that we don't always talk about with defensive linemen. Kenny Grant has got some big paws, and he knows how to use it. I mean, consistently getting his hands on footballs at the line of scrimmage, that in a way is just as good as getting to the quarterback. So I think Kenneth Grant coming in at number 4, quite fair, and quite frankly, would be a guy that probably is the number 1 player on a lot of Power 5 programs across the country, but he's behind the 3 players that we mentioned at the top that are probably the best players in their position group. And I'm going to go to Colston Loveland at number 3. And a lot of people like to talk about Michigan not having pass catchers. And I think a lot of Michigan fans say, yeah, we would like to have a deeper room of wide receivers, but you make no mistake about it. Our passing game goes through the tight end position now. And something that doesn't get enough talked about that I really like about Colston Loveland, has taken strides every single year as a run blocker. And that's something that is really rare from some of these top tight ends that can be weapons in the passing attack, but really can't hold up in the run game. Colston Loveland can get it done as an inline blocker, but is an absolute matchup nightmare as a pass catcher. And you talk about who's going to be our leading pass catcher for this Michigan program. I think there's a very good chance that Colston Loveland's that guy. He's very good after the catch. He's very good over the middle of the field. And with that big frame and how fluid he is and the body control that he is such a appealing target, quarterback-friendly target for quarterbacks attacking in the middle of the field. 31 first down catches. That was a number that kind of popped as well. You talk about those 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7 situations. Who were we going to in 2023? It was Colston Loveland working in the middle of the field. I think he is a massive asset that I think just inherently, because he's a tight end, kind of doesn't get talked enough about. The best tight end in the country, in my opinion, heading into 2024. Next up on the list, I went with Will Johnson. And once again, if you want to put Will Johnson at number 1, I would not argue with that. You guys know Mason Graham is going to be my number 1 player. You look at Will Johnson, for my thinking, the best cornerback in the country, didn't even really get thrown at last year. You take a look, he only faced 38 targets, and when he was targeted, only a 45% completion percentage. That is probably why people did not go after a guy like Will Johnson. Excuse me. When you have a cornerback that can just take away half of the field, it gets so much easier for you to run a defense. And you look at Wink Martindale, he wants to send his linebackers, he wants to send his safeties, and you have a cornerback that you can say, hey, we're just going to play some man coverage, we're going to send some pressure, and we have a cornerback out there that we can trust. It's going to be massive for Wink Martindale. Will Johnson, best cornerback in the country, number 2 player for Michigan, and number 1, my guy Mason Graham. And I think it's so rare to find game wreckers on the inside of the defensive line. Mason Graham's one of them. And you look at second on the team in quarterback hurries, a guy that has so much juice as a pass rusher with his size and athleticism, how he can use his hands. He's a former wrestler out of high school, and you can tell that he was a wrestler. I mean, he is the best that I've seen in a very long time in terms of using his hands, fighting off offensive linemen as a pass rusher. And then in the run game, this guy is unblockable at times. I mean, he is so good at shedding blocks and making his plays at or behind the line of scrimmage. And, it doesn't always show up in the box score, only 7.5 tackles for a loss, 3 sacks. But you start taking a look at, second in the team with run stops at 22 with an average depth of tackle of only 1 yard down the field. He wins at the point of attack. He gets off blocks. He's present in the run game and can get after the passer. And when you have a weapon that can get after the passer from the inside, that's a really good recipe for having a really good defense. Mason Graham coming in at number 1. Would love to get some feedback from you guys, the Michigan fans. Y'all know I love talking this program. Had a blast putting together this list. I would love to hear some feedback. Love to hear your top 10s in the comments section. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.